Over the course of Shadowlands and even at its beginning, Blizzard added a lot of mounts, more than any other expansion before it or following it currently. This doesn't even account for the Gladiator or Vicious PvP mounts during this time as well. During this video, we're going to go over some of the hardest to obtain mounts in Shadowlands as of the time of writing this script, Dragonflight 10.1.7. So mounts much harder during their current time to farm might not be here, as the late addition of flying in Shadowlands, extra levels and gear contributed to these farms. Some entries may also be tied with others as they are incredibly similar in obtaining, and the only thing they don't share are their looks. To start off the list, we have two Paragon mounts, the Fierce Razorwing and the Barrel Shardhide mounts, added in patch 9.1. In terms of research required to understand how to farm these mounts, it's pretty straightforward, and all the game would ask of you was to reach Exalted status with the new Death's Advanced Reputation. Since Legion, when you reach Exalted with Reputation, you would reap all of the benefits from Exalted like normal, but the bar would reset and provide an additional grind of rep, usually to 10,000. This system would be called Paragon Reputation. When this bar was completely filled, there would be an emissary in the main reputation hub or whatever reputation you'd finish, and they would offer you a cache of various goods. The loot within these chests would usually be gold, some currency depending on the rep, or even things like pets and mounts. When it comes to the Death's Advanced Reputation, not only would the Paragon system return, but it would bring with it 2 different mounts in its box. This means not only would you need to grind out the reputation completely and earn a Paragon cache, you would need to hope for the already relatively low drop rate of 2 mounts. It was possible you could loot both mounts at once and on your first box, cutting the grind off entirely, but the odds of that were really low. The way to grind reputation with Death's Advance is through dailies that appear at random NPCs, a single weekly quest, the world boss Morgeth, Covenant Assault, raid boss Insignia of Domination, and a few rare events in Korthia. It was a simple farm but usually pretty time consuming, and because there were 2 mounts, players could be stuck on these mounts for months before seeing them in their journals. It earns a spot on this list for being relatively simple to farm and can be done across multiple characters rather easily, but RNG could hold people back for a long time here. And at number 9, we have the Cryptic Aurelid mount, added in patch 8.2. This mount will be obtained from completing the From A to Zereth achievement, a large meta of other achievements in the Zereth Mortis zone from Shadowlands. A meta achievement is typically the culmination of multiple achievements put together for one grand reward at the end of it. Many new zones and expansions have these meta grinds, and Zereth Mortis apply these once again. In order to get the achievement, you must complete the entire storyline, kill 3 special rares on hours-long timers, complete the entire Cypher Console research, reach Exalted with the new reputation, discover every hidden treasure, kill every rare, and craft either 5 pets or mounts with a Protoform synthesis system. The strategy is relatively easy to follow, but the main grind is both maximizing your Cypher Console and earning Exalted. The console's research typically takes a good few weeks due to the research times applied to them, and the grind for the Cypher currencies themselves in the zone. Thankfully, this set of achievements isn't so much of a long RNG grind, but just a time-consuming but elite guaranteed in a certain time frame if you keep at it every single day. The completion rate of this achievement is also pretty high in regards to entries in this list too, coming in at around 27% of completion rate according to Wowhead. This may seem low, but this comes to thousands of players with the mount. If you just did Zereth Mortis content daily when it was current, you may have attained the achievement without even noticing or have come close to it. And at number 8, we have another mixture of mounts, the Deathrunner, Prototype Leaper, and the unsuccessful Prototype Fleet Pod. These 3 mounts were added in patch 9.2 of Shadowlands and were created through a new pseudo-profession system called the Protoform Synthesis. This system would allow you to craft your own mounts and pets when obtaining materials required in the same way you would farm materials for a new chess piece. This includes recipes. In order to unlock the Protoform Synthesis, you must progress your Cypher Console in Zereth Mortis by obtaining the new currency, Cyphers are the first ones, which you could earn through all means of world content in the zone. The Cypher Console was mostly just a system that would improve the overall life of completing content in the open world and could either provide things like extra damage or reputation. Typically, upgrading the console could take a few days, as the research timers could be in the 5 days and 18 hours range of waiting, even after obtaining the correct amount of currency to upgrade. Once you had fully upgraded the Sopranian Understanding row, you were eligible to craft mounts. Now, the mounts on this entry are a bit more special than the other 21 mounts the system had to offer, because the rare reagent the system asked for is only obtained in the current raid, Sepulchre of the First Ones, or at an even lower drop rate, the Paragon Cache. This reagent would have a pretty low drop chance from the boss Lehuvim from all modes, so this meant you can get at least 4 attempts a week on one character. The boss may only give you 1 reagent at a time, and to be eligible to loot the reagent, you must have the Protoform Synthesis unlocked as well. The problem with this, however, is because raids aren't a weekly lockout, you could spend weeks, if not months, on this process alone, even after you would obtain the recipe and the other required crafting materials. Because the game makes you need the Cypher Console research to actually access the synthesis system, it made farming across alts much more tedious and annoying, since it was not account-wide. So you could be stuck on this part for a long time, but also done in a minimum of 2 weeks, as one of the needed materials is given to you in a quest to unlock the synthesis. Upon completion of the same quest on an alt, however, you would not receive the tools of incomprehensible experimentation, making the raid boss farm completely necessary. And at number 7, we have the Bracelet of Salaranga from the achievement Breaking the Chains, added in patch 9.1. This mount would be the meta grind for both the zones Korthia and the Maw, creating a larger criteria to reach it, as most open world meta grinds require just one zone for the reward. This achievement was similar to its Zereth Mortis counterpart, but came before setting the overall tone of farm Shadowlands possessed, even with it arriving on its first patch. What Break the Chains would ask of you was to complete the Korthia campaign, defeat every Tormentor of Torghast, a special rare that spawns in the Maw, explore all of Korthia, complete the Archivist Codex, kill every rare in Korthia, complete 4 Covenant Assault achievements, collect every Archist Relic, earn Exalted with Death's Advance, and discover every hidden treasure within Korthia and the Maw. A good chunk of these achievements could be completed on one character within a day or so if you really committed to it, and got lucky spawns on rares, but the ones that stand out the most are leveling the Archivist Codex to level 6, and completing the 4 Covenant Assault achievements. The Archivist Codex was a system implemented in patch 9.1 that was meant to allow all the characters a faster method of gearing. The general idea was you'd go around and farm mobs in the daily events of Korthia, and obtain unique items you could turn in for exchange reputation with the Codex. As you level the Codex, your rewards will increase, and you'll get better alt gear to upgrade on a tier system. It sounds good in practice, but in play, the items you received to upgrade the Codex were incredibly slow in obtaining, and created a space where players altogether would just not interact with the system, because it took longer to upgrade it to full rather than just do the PvE or PvP endgame content itself to gear. Not only that, but this meta in particular asks you to turn in every single special Codex item, totaling it in 20. Meanwhile, while you do that, there are also the Covenant Assaults you have to worry about, and thankfully you only need 4 out of the 9 achievements offered. The easiest to do was Unified Front, as it only asks you to complete every Covenant-specific assault in the Maw, rather than anything special, but the other 3 could be left up to you. These Covenant Assaults were a bi-weekly event, and it meant you could do 2 a week, but the quests offered to complete these achievements could be completed varying depending on the randomness of the next Covenant Assault. An effort that could take just a few weeks, and could also just become a few months, and all you're left to do is just wait. And at number 6, we have yet another mix of mounts coming from the Necroray Eggs. These mounts were all added in the beginning of Shadowlands as a reward for completing calling quests for Maldraxxus. Callings in Shadowlands were the replacement of emissaries from BFA, and would be completely optional in terms of completing them, but offered great rewards for cosmetic collectors. These callings were on a daily rotation, and should a Maldraxxus one show up on the table, you would complete whatever the criteria it asked and then turn it in for your rewards. These quests would usually just ask you to go kill a few rares, do world quests, or just complete activities in a certain zone. What made farming these eggs tedious was because of the rotation of 4 different zones completely at random. You can go a few days without a single Maldraxxus calling showing up on the table. Once it finally would show up and you did what it asked, you would receive a chest of either blue or purple quality. Neither would increase nor decrease your chance of getting the egg, and upon opening it, it would have a small chance of giving you an egg. This egg would hatch after 3 days and give you a variation of one of the 3 Necroray Eggs. This means that even if you were getting an egg finally on its low drop rate, you would need to do it another 2 times to receive the other 2 and continue the grind for as long as it may take you. Players could spend hundreds of attempts on these eggs and never know if the results would be worth it because of the long waiting game Blizzard made you play to collect them. Though, with some luck, like most mounts, you could be done with the grind in only a few attempts, but the majority of collectors are left stumped on this portion of a Shadowlands mounts for quite some time. And at number 5, we have the Mawsworn Soulhunter, added on the release of Shadowlands from the Maw. This mount would drop from a rare in the Maw called the Gorge Shadehound in the Beastborn's location of the Maw. The rare spawns with an event called Hunt Shadehounds, which was a rotating event on a 5-day and 18-hour timer. There were 4 in total, and they would all rotate on a set time in the same order each time. In particular, the Shadehound Hunt was what made the game not only eligible for the rare to potentially spawn, but have a chance at its low drop rate mount. When he spawns, you'll be prompted to kill about 6 packs of trash, and then the Gorge Shadehound themselves are able to be attacked and killed for an attempt at the mount. At 50%, the rare runs further away into the cave you fight them in, however. The only issue with this is on some servers, the NPC has a strange bug that will make it get completely stuck in the terrain and become unable to be killed, as it will evade all of your attacks and eventually just despawn, as no one's attacking it, ruining your attempt on that character. Back in Shadowlands, it was slightly easier to farm than it is today, as more people were in the zone and realm hopping around, which was just joining a group of different servers who were in the same zone to phasing and see what they saw. With less and less people in the Maw, realm hopping is pretty much impossible now, and you are left to as many characters as you have in order to grind out this mount. With its unique spawn requirements on rotation, it also can only be killed once on that character every 3.5 days. and then is unable to be farmed for 10.5 days due to other hunts taking its place. If you were farming the rare on just a single character, this means you would only get 26 attempts a year per character for a roughly 1 to 2% drop chance mount. If you multiply this by the amount of characters you're able to get to the Maw at the maximum of 60, you will reach 1,560 attempts a year, and hopefully by then you would have gotten it. But they don't call the Maw the hell of WoW for nothing. And number 4 on this list, we have the Marrowfang mount added on release to Shadowlands and can be obtained from the last boss of the Necrotic Wake on Mythic difficulty. This mount was relatively straightforward in farming and only required you to run the Necrotic Wake dungeon on Mythic difficulty only and killing the last boss. This means you can get only 1 kill per week on each character at 60 maximum if you have that many characters to run through the dungeon. The drop rate is already at 1% like many other dungeon raid drop mounts, and netting a collection rate of 9% in the player base. When Shadowlands was current, you used to be able to run this dungeon as a keystone, and this would cause high-end collectors to spam low-level keys and carry low-level people to get as many attempts as possible without the annoying need of over half 100 characters. It made more casual players get to possibly experience something closer to higher-end content, as they would very often get carried towards their goals by die-hard mount farmers. Some drops during current could sell for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gold. And at number 3, we have the Armored Chosen Tauralus. This mount was added at the beginning of Shadowlands as a reward for completing the Things to Do When You're Dead meta achievement. Shadowlands had the unique system of mini-games when it was created, and these progression systems could be upgraded over time with the game's universal currency, anima, and redeemed souls obtained from the Maw. Anima could be rewarded for just about anything, from things as simple as killing an open world rare or slaying raid bosses on A difficulty. For the Necrolord specifically, this minigame would come in the form of the profession-like system where you create your own undead construct with crafting materials. These constructs offered many weekly quests that gave you even more materials to craft more of them, and cosmetics to dress them as you enjoyed. The achievement to obtain the mount required you to complete all 31 weekly quests, which were on a completely random rotation each week. You could spend months on this step alone for your mount and not even be as close as you'd like. You also needed to craft every construct, which required level 5 of the Sanctum, which could take you on a grind of its own. After that, you must craft 100 anima-bound wraps, another item you can craft with the system, and collect 25 of the special cosmetics for your constructs. This achievement is also not account-wide, meaning you cannot potentially get different weeklies across multiple characters and finish the grind just in a few weeks, unfortunately. With a bit of RNG, you could, at minimum, be done in around 2 months or so. And at number 2 on our list, we have Vengeance from the Sylvanas Windrunner in Sanctum Domination on Mythic difficulty for patch 9.1. This mount was added as a final reward for players that would defeat the Sylvanas encounter in Mythic difficulty, and back in Shadowlands, it was a guaranteed 100% drop chance, with 2 per raid of 20 members. With Shadowlands no longer being current content, the twice per raid has been removed and the drop chance is lowered to a 1%, like all Mythic mounts before it. Shadowlands is also only one expansion behind Dragonflight, so farming on Mythic has still proved to be difficult at times, especially with less systems to improve player power, and requires multiple players ranging from 10 to 20 at a time. This means in order to effectively farm this mount, you would require the help of others, and it may be difficult in finding a group of decently geared players to aid you at times, and some people are unfamiliar with their mechanics even years after release. Because it was a raid, you could only farm the mount once per week per character on just 1 difficulty. Since not everyone understands the fight, however, you could spend the entire lockout attempt just to reach Sylvanas herself, and upon arriving, your group might not even be able to kill her. This would result in players in lost lockouts and making it much more difficult to farm consistently every week for those who missed out during current content. According to data for Azeroth, the mount only has a 2.5% acquisition rate on all WoW accounts, making it not just one of the rarest mounts from Shadowlands, but also one of the most difficult to farm as it requires the help of others, but the lack of how many runs someone could do per week. And finally, at number 1 on this list, we have Zereth Overseer from Jailer on Mythic difficulty from several of the first one's raid added in patch 9.2. For the same reasons that Vengeance was difficult to obtain, so too was the Zereth Overseer, but with much more heightened requirements. Not only was this a tier above SOD, but the Jailer himself had tricky mechanics of line of sighting him and pits players could fall into and die. Many players have the common mindset of just rushing every boss they see on Legacy content, and just stand and hit the boss until it's dead and collect their loot when the fight is over. This rule doesn't always apply very well when the expansion is only 1 or 2 years over, and can create high wipe counts for uninformed groups. The Jailer had a mechanic where occasionally he could perform a cast called Relentless Domination. This mechanic would mind control anyone within the boss's line of sight unless they were to hide behind player-made pillars from the Rune of Damnation. Players marked with this rune would need to jump into the empty pits of the fight's arena, and when the debuff expired, they would explode and be shot back onto the platform to fight the boss, and a pillar would follow behind them. Players unaware of this mechanic would end up getting mind-controlled almost instantly, and cut the damage required to down the boss almost in half, if not entirely, and cause a quick wipe. So overall, not only would you need a larger group of people to help you in farming this mount, but they would also need to actually have an understanding of how to do the fight for your attempts. And that will complete our list. Shadowlands had such a large abundance of mounts, it's almost impossible to pin down just 10 as the hardest, especially when obtaining some of them were almost the exact same method, or just came from a different source at an easier activity. Were there any mounts you think that were harder to obtain than the ones on this list, or do you not agree with the order of the list? If so, let me know, as well as ideas for future videos similar to this one.